Hello, and tonight on Joynews Prime, parliamentary seats could hit some 300 as consideration for the creation of additional constituencies get attention. Minority Chief Whip is even advocating a downsize of the current 275 constituencies. So we'll hear his justification.
Many of our MPs are not doing the work that they are elected to do. And I have said time without number, I don't think we can put our hand on more than 100 MPs.
On education, examinations at the 8 technical universities put on hold as TUTAC and TUSAC embark on indefinite strike. So we'll hear from frustrated students who say their fate so far hangs in the balance.
No be invigilation, meaning definitely no exam and no marking of scripts.
We're having a paper today. We are here and then we are stranded. We came and then there's nothing, not even, you can't even see the lectures around.
And if you were worried, well, perhaps this will give you some explanation, because tonight the National Identification Authority will also explain why you are yet to receive your Ghana card, although your details so far have been captured.
When people go to register, they are required to provide consistent information. You could only be born one day, so you cannot have 2 dates of birth.
My partner for the last 4 days is here.
Coming up in business, state-owned aluminium melting company Aluworks at the verge of collapse following importation of cheap aluminium products.
Well, my name is Roland Walker. Make sure you stay tuned to Joy Prime, which comes to you live from our studios right here at Kokomimle in Accra with digital address GA0992539. Meanwhile, you can also watch us live through DSTV channel 421 and GoTV channel 144. Make sure you stay with us for the next 2 hours. Well, you would think it's not possible. And it is. Some 25 more constituencies could be created this year to bring the number of parliamentary seats in Ghana to some 300. The decision may be based on the outcome of the National Population Census expected to be conducted this year. If the proposed creation goes through, it will resurrect the debate for a new parliamentary chamber just because the existing one lacks space to accommodate the new seats. The Minority Chief Whip in Parliament, Mohammed Muntaka Mubarak, is kicking against the proposal of the new seats and rather advocating a special seat reserved for technocrats and other minority groups.
Many of our MPs are not doing the work that they are elected to do. And I have said time without number, I don't think we can put our hand on more than 100 MPs who are really dedicated and committed to the work. So you have the chamber sometimes partially empty. Sometimes you have people just walk in and walk out. Sometimes people don't pay attention to the details when it comes, simply because their attention is somewhere. And it is my view that if I had my way, I would have said that let's reduce the constituency to 200. And then the 75, we'll leave it for the political parties based on the results that we get from the election. And then have a strict criteria. So, for example, say minimum education, you need to have a degree, you need to have a working experience of no less than 15 years, you need to have that, you need to have that, so that it will restrict the political parties, the caliber of persons that they can do. So that these people becomes the technical component, or better still, use it for the affirmative action. In Uganda, you have seats for women, seats for the youth, physically challenged, the military, and other relevant minority groups. Because, I mean, those minority groups naturally may not be able to win a seat. When we do that, I want to believe that it may help our democracy. But if it is just about adding seats, my worry is that currently the chamber, we are even congested. The seats that are in the House are 282, and we are 275. So the only spare seats are about 6 or 7. Now, I'm hearing, oh, they want to add some CEOs, some say they are adding 25. If that is true, what it will mean is that we are putting the cart before the horse to justify for a new chamber.
And Alhaji Mubarak, who also wants in the interim a biometric attendance recording system installed in Parliament just to check MPs from unduly staying away from parliamentary duty. He says present system of manual recording is just not robust enough.
the person gets absent. When it's just about getting to the time that the person will have to go through some punishment, the person shows his face 2-3 days, then the person goes back to the absenteeism. So the person breaks the data chain. Secondly, people get there. They come and sit in the chamber for 10 minutes and walk out. And the rules do not make any provision for that. If somebody comes, and we are supposed to sit from 10 to 2 o'clock, minimum time. If someone comes to sit for 30 minutes and walks away, what happens? The rules doesn't make provision for that. And remember, we are colleagues. Sometimes, oh, what are the whips doing? What are the leaders doing? We are colleagues. Me being the whip doesn't make me the most intelligent person in my caucus. It doesn't give me the right to hang any member. It doesn't give me the right to expel any member. It doesn't give me the right to say the salary of any member should be slashed because the person sat in the chamber for just some few hours. That is why I have been advocating right in the chamber that we need to have a biometric system. You clock in and you clock out. Even if we can get that and publish on our website every month that these are the MPs who were in the House and this is the number of hours they sat in the chamber, maybe advertising this to their constituents may force a lot of MPs to sit.
From what you did at Insha, I learned that some MPs are even signing on behalf of others, which is criminal.
I mean, this one, both myself and the first VT speaker also have raised it on the floor. That look, there have been instances that because of quorum, we have to adjourn. Then the next day you come, you have more than the quorum number being present. And then sometimes you know definitely this person has traveled. So who signed for him? Because of the way the register where is kept.
Well, if you're indecisive, I guess we need to bring in the experts or the professionals. And the question we have to ask is whether this really is feasible and what a better way. We do have some of the best experts online streaming into the studio through Skype. We have Executive Director for the African Center for Parliamentary Affairs, Dr. Rashid Draman, and Principal Lead at Odikro, Nehemiah Atiga. All of you, good evening. But first, Dr. Rashid, let me first ask you, if you look at first, a population census is expected to be conducted this year, but will you be surprised if ultimately it ends in the creation of new constituencies just because we've added more numbers to who we are as a country?
Roland, thank you very much for having me. I think over the years, we have seen, even without a population census, our two major political parties have created new constituencies. So I wouldn't be surprised that at the end of this year, or maybe before the end of the year, once the census is done, what is certain is that the Ghana Statistical Service is going to tell us that our population has increased. And then there goes the justification if the politicians want to do it. There is a very solid justification, because even without a census, without any empirical evidence, we have seen constituencies increase. So a short answer to your question is that I wouldn't be surprised.
Now, Nehemiah, if you take a look at what the framers of the Constitution did, what would be the intention? The intention that, well, if we have numbers swelling up, then we needed to have more MPs representing those populations, or just that we needed to use our discretion adequately?
So the framers of the Constitution, the spirit of the Constitution, we're looking at a situation where once you have the numbers, you want them to be represented properly. So then that becomes a justification to create constituencies, because once the population is growing and there's a core mandate of an MP being a representative of the people, then you create new constituencies. But I think, like Draman had said in the past, whether there was a census or not, we went ahead to create constituencies. We found ways to justify why we should create constituencies. We actually did a project around the demarcation, EC demarcation, that somewhat painted a picture of us going about it in the wrong way, rather than ensuring that we demarcate constituencies without just doing that because it's a wish of a political party or it's a wish of some leader. So if we're following the proper approach, we may justify it by the numbers because you need someone to represent the people based on a certain number.
Dr. Draman, what will be some of the best practices in those jurisdictions that we tend to benchmark our democracy by?
Well, I mean, if you look at maybe one of the places where most of the time parliaments from the Commonwealth like to go and benchmark, that is the UK Parliament and the UK system. I think on average in the UK, I think most constituencies have about 60,000 electorates. If you look at it that way, then perhaps maybe that might be something that we can apply to our system, because we don't want to say we go there, we look at some practices, and then the ones that are not maybe politically convenient for us, we come, then we overlook them. So I think for me that's perhaps maybe one of the places that we can look up to in terms of the numbers. And let me just emphasize, the figure is on electorate. So there could be a constituency that has maybe 1 million people, but only about maybe 50,000 or 60,000 can technically and legally vote. So the emphasis is on the number of people who can vote.
And still with you, Dr. Rahman, if you look at the exercise of that power of creation of the constituency that we've done in the Fourth Republic, especially over the last maybe a decade and a half, what have been some of the justifications? Have those justifications, if you take a look at the experiences over the years, been really the reasons why they were created or intended?
Well, I am not too sure about that, Roland. I think that over the years, I don't think that our political parties have really engaged the technocrats in terms of trying to get their opinion and trying to get their technical support. Or even where they did, I do not think that they have really used the recommendations from technocrats. Over the years, what we have heard is that, for instance, I think there was the last creation that we saw. Many people argue that while NDC might have created these new constituencies, but it might go against them in terms of when we get to the elections and so on and so forth. I mean, which suggested at the time that I think the basis for the creation was more political than technical.
Now, Nehemiah, you have to cast your mind back to how effective then these expansions have been in terms of the creation of the constituencies, the contributions of the individuals who have filled those portfolios. And you would say that perhaps it's a good justification, wouldn't you say? If you have smaller populations, it would mean that you have a hands-on approach to trying to monitor who your constituents are.
Yes, so that would have been the ideal thing, having the numbers and having people representing them. Unfortunately, these folks get into Parliament and do not truly represent their people. I mean, if you are not attending sittings and if you are not participating in the chamber, you are not representing your people. Your people expect you to represent them. They expect you to have oversight over the executive. Yet, if you are absenting yourself, then you are not truly representing them. So, like I said, in the spirit of the Constitution, the members of Parliament are expected to be there.
Yeah.
And the numbers, once you have a certain number of the population, you are expected to have an MP for them so that you represent them better. Because you know a situation where there's a large population and there's one MP who may not be able to engage. Remember that an MP is supposed to engage with the people on the ground as well, have town hall meetings and all of those things, be able to explain the policies and the laws and all of those things to their constituents. Now, if you have a large number, then that will be difficult for them. So there's a clear justification if you are going to follow what the Constitution says, as compared to if you're following what the political parties want by just having the numbers. And that is a problem. And then that would then we can go back and say that even when we have the current numbers we have are not doing what's expected of them in terms of representing the people that their electorate or their constituents. And so we are more or less running around in circles, trying to do almost the same thing again. Let's bring in more constituencies. Let's get more MPs in there. We are complaining about the size of the chamber that is never filled until someone has made noise, until Odibro has made noise, until the speaker has made noise. And guess what? We have lawmakers who are becoming lawbreakers, who are trying to game the system. So you are not there, but you have been marked present. You are not there. You've missed the 15 sittings, and suddenly you are showing up, because you know the Constitution says that after 15 sittings, you should vacate your seat because you have broken Article 97 Clause 1C of the Constitution. So we find ourselves in a situation that shouldn't make any electorate happy.
Yeah, well, a point made there. Dr. Draman, we've seen that even Mr. Muntaka has now stretched the argument to the point that if we're having larger numbers, which could be the point, then we'll need to have a second chamber. And that also would be accompanied by a great financial outlay.
Well, I think if the numbers increase and there is justification for a new chamber, I guess maybe that's a cost that comes with our democracy. But as my my colleague there has mentioned, I think the most important thing is that our MPs need to show up and work. And absenteeism, I think, must really be addressed. Having said that, Roland, let me just emphasize the fact that when you look around the world, across parliaments, whether in Africa, in Asia, or in North America, I think absenteeism is something that is very chronic in most parliaments, because MPs mostly in many jurisdictions, they justify the fact that, you know, if an issue is being discussed and I don't have any expertise and I don't have any interest in that, I mean, I have heard this even in advanced democracies. Having said that, I mean, those are places and systems where institutions work, and perhaps even if MPs don't show up and work, I think the downside of it or the impact of it is not too negative on the population. I mean, here you come down to our system, we cannot afford that. I mean, we are a developing country, and we need everyone to contribute their quota. I mean, I heard Honorable Muntaka made the argument that, you know, the fact that he's the chief whip, or the fact that somebody is majority leader, doesn't make him maybe superior to another MP because they are colleagues and so on, which I think is a very fair argument. I mean, even the speaker is first among equals. What that seems to suggest, perhaps, is that maybe we need to get the standing orders reviewed. We need to look at this issue dispassionately in our constitution and make sure that, you know, it's not somebody who is saying, I'm going to punish you, but I mean, that's what the rule says. And then once you break the law, of course, then you are subject to those sanctions. But it shouldn't be, as we have currently, a very elastic kind of rule where he says 15 times absent, and then somebody is 14 times absent, then the 15th time he shows up, and then suddenly we realize that the law has some limitations. If we are changing the standing orders and the rules, I think they have to be very tight and they have to be very strict. And then also, I think our members, I think, must be honorable. Yeah. Because we see most of the time in the front bench, you see Honorable Muntaka, you see the leaders present. And then behind them, on the majority side, you see the majority leader and all the leaders present. Behind them, I mean, you see empty seats. And then when you begin making arguments about maybe some benefits or some benefits that have to go to members of parliament, then you see society up in arms. And it's mainly because of the kind of image that they have of the House and what they see on the screens.
That aspect, and Nehemiah, about creating the second chamber, but we also do know the Constitution has clearly outlined who qualifies to be a member of parliament or could be part of the country's legislature. How do we look at some of those nuances, knowing that those will be advocating a special seat for some special groups?
Yeah, but even before we go to that, I want to touch on the fact that Parliament in itself, even in their current standing orders, can have the Privileges Committee bring, excuse my language, but rogue MPs to book. But unfortunately, we find ourselves in a place where it looks like you being, Roland, imagine you're in school and you can break the laws without the disciplinary committee enforcing the laws, even though the laws are there. So that's where we find ourselves right now. So even the Privileges Committee would not do anything to them. So it's business as usual, and it will continue. But coming to the issue of the second chamber, it will be interesting. Coming from his argument, we could actually look at it, and it will be interesting to get, let's say, traditional leaders and specific people who, for instance, marginalized groups, get seats in there and also participate in our lawmaking process and our governance process. So it will be interesting to implement something like that, because they give room for greater participation in terms of our participatory democracy. So it will be interesting to look at that suggestion. The only thing is that on the other side, on the flip side, you're also trying to then peg the other chamber to a certain group of people that would then form like an elitist group of people. Because even in our current legislature, you can use your research assistants and all the support that you have to research into areas that you don't understand. So you are not limited to your knowledge. You also have people who can work with you to understand things that you do not. Obviously, there will be things that you may not be able to understand, so you may decide to stay away from.
Dr. Draman, what's your mind on the subject?
Look, first of all, I don't think that Honorable Muntaka was talking about a second chamber, as it were, rather than like I think a bigger chamber that can accommodate the new numbers. If we were to go to maybe 300 or so. But I think the point I would like to make is that, look, right now the affirmative action bill and issues are before our parliament. In this country, there are a lot of qualified women, I think, that we have, very professional women and so on. If indeed, maybe Honorable Muntaka's suggestion is something that were to be adopted, I would say, why not our parliament and our speaker start by saying, okay, maybe the number of seats that the number of new seats that will be created, let's reserve that to very professional, women who have something that they could contribute or who have demonstrated over the years in their various fields of endeavor that they could make some contribution. And let's start with that.
Okay.
Honorable Muntaka cited East Africa. They have special seats reserved for women.
Okay.
But I don't want it to be kind of tokenism.
All right.
So, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. And we've been having some great interaction so far, contributing to the story. And of course, the Executive Director for the Africa Center for Parliamentary Affairs, Dr. Rashid Rahman, the Principal Lead at Odikro, Nehemiah Atiga. Now moving on, there is growing uncertainty among students of the Accra Technical University as the second day of scheduled end of semester examinations so far has been cancelled. This follows the Technical Teachers Association and the Senior Staff Association decision to abandon work, protesting non-payment of allowances by governments this week. The students who were expected to be writing the examinations now say the situation is adversely affecting them. PSA Nana Safo has more in the following report.
It might sound like a classroom or busy lecture hall, but the scholars are busy under a shed as all study rooms have been locked up. It is day 4 of an indefinite strike declared by TUTAG this week. The Senior Staff Association declared the strike of their own too. For the students, the protest is gradually crippling academic work.
I'm not on campus, I'm outside the campus, so therefore I have to take car in and out, wasting my transport and all those things. We really need the government to adhere to what they are looking for and just help us do it. But if we don't write the examination now, I don't know when we are going to write it again.
Classes are closed, so we don't have anywhere to learn aside from this place, and we are not comfortable with it. They said they will not be teaching, so, and there will not be a vigilation, meaning definitely no exam and no marking of scripts.
We're having a paper today. We are here and then we are stranded. We came and then there's nothing, you can't even see the lectures around.
This will be the second time in a row students will be denied end of semester examinations, as the previous one, scheduled for December 2019, was postponed to this week. TUTAG chairman for the Accra Technical University, Dr. Ibrahim Subeiru, who spoke to Joynews, said the situation was avoidable.
Why won't you pay based upon the data that is available and then write to request for data appropriately and then do it and make plus and minuses, because it happens a lot all the time. Somebody is overpaid, they do read through net and then correct it. What we are saying is that government must pay. The instructions that come from Minister of Finance to controller, nobody should be impediment in the way of controller in the payment.
SRC President of Accra Technical University, Safo Kwesi Kantanka, warned of a massive student demonstration dubbed Operation Desert Storm if the matter is not resolved within the shortest time.
We have plans that if, let's say, the government fails to intervene and then other internal factors that management are trying to do also, bears no fruit. SRC, in collaboration with our mother university, Joynews, we are planning alongside that what we did last year in terms of the intrinsic or the internal demonstration. This time around we will be doing an external one, a massive one, and then it will be called Operation Desert Storm. With the students, we are also in a way involved. As I said, when 2 elephants goes to war, it is the ground that suffers.
It remains to be seen how the impasse is to be resolved within the coming days. As TUTAG, TUSAG, NCT, and other concerned bodies continue the long battle for agreed allowances and working conditions, the academic fate of close to 17,000 students hangs in the balance. From here at Accra Technical University, PSA Nana Safo reports for Joynews.
And the latest we're getting is that the National Council for Tertiary Education has been responding to the declaration of strike by the two bodies, and we'll just quickly run the statement by you. And it's indicating that on October 17, 2019, a meeting was convened at the instance of the Ministry of Employment and Labour Relations, and this involved all the parties on government side as well as TUTAG. Now, the purpose, among others, according to the statement, was to reiterate the rationale for the payment and also assure commitment to addressing any matters arising, more so with all the reassurances to get TUTAG to call off the strike and also cooperate with the administrative processes for the payment to be processed, being the reason why they're striking. Now, the meeting affirmed that August 2019 as the effective date for the payment of these allowances they are advocating. Unfortunately, however, the meeting did not succeed in persuading TUTAG to call off the strike, according to the National Council for Tertiary Education. It continues that at this said meeting, at least one vice-chancellor of a technical university was present, and the government side made it clear to TUTAG that the allowances could only be paid after the data on entitled holders had been submitted through the council for verification and onward transmission to the controller of account. Controller and Accountant General's Department. And lastly, it says the impasse continue without the submission of the required data until the National Labour Commission summoned all parties just last October. And true, the Labour Commission ruled that the technical university teachers should be paid the same allowances as applicable in the traditional public universities by close of December 2019. And subsequently, any arrears arising paid in January and February this year. Well, and that statement signed by Professor Mohammed Salifu, the Executive Secretary for the NCTE, also concludes by saying that indeed huge commitment had already been made in facilities and infrastructure, and more are expected in the future to make sure the technical universities are fit for purpose. On the staff front, it states categorically that they can only crave the indulgence of the unions to cooperate with the appropriate administrative processes while work is done towards securing the best interests of everyone. Still to come, National Identification Authority will also explain why you are yet to receive your Ghana card, although your details have been captured.
When people go to register, they are required to provide consistent information. You could only be born one day, so you cannot have 2 dates of birth.
We'll bring you some more local stories. And the National Identification Authority says discrepancies in biographic data of registered applicants are among the major reasons for the delays in issuing ID cards for those registered. The registration process for the Ghana card, according to the authority, has been hit by many challenges, prominent among them being the unusually large number of persons whose cards have not been issued them since they were printed. Speaking on the Super Morning Show with Daniel Dadze, the Executive Director of the NIA, Professor Ken Natefa, argued inconsistencies in data provided by some applicants was a major cause of the delays in issuing the cards.
When people go to register, they are required to provide consistent information. You could only be born one day. You were born on only one day, so you cannot have 2 dates of birth. There are people who registered for the Ghana card during the President Kufuor, President Mills's era and President Mahama's era. When they registered under, between 2008 and 2012, 2013, they used names or date of births that are different, some of them, that are different from the names and dates of birth that they are presenting to NIA in 2018, 2019, 2020. The system that we have designed is so robust, so sensitive as to, as it were, arrest and send into adjudication those who have SNIT, date of birth at SNIT, and are seeking to reduce their age, become younger through the NIA process. The system arrests them and sends them into adjudication. Those who were Georgina Mansa but have now become Georgina Dazi and have gone through no legal process to change name and gazette it, and they present conflicting documentation, the system arrests them and sends them into adjudication. A third scenario is where your biometrics and your biography, your biometrics, fingerprints, your face, and all of that, and another person's are so identical, the system is suspicious. You have so many Joseph Mensahs in this country, and it is conceivable that some of them will have very proximate date of birth or the same date of birth. The system becomes suspicious, it arrests them and sends it into adjudication. And the thinking is that, or the arrangement is that, each of these has to be determined on a case-by-case basis.
Natefa continues that the process at some registration centers so far had been characterized by a shortage of materials, the extortion and registration of foreigners in violation of the law, among many others. He blames this on the misconduct of his staff, describing some as very corrupt.
There have been many instances across the region of some of our officers misconducting themselves. And I'm talking about its injury to public confidence and, of course, its impact on queue management because of a false sense of protocol, because of corrupt conduct that some of them have engaged in. This payment business, it is true that they have not been paid for the month of December. But that has got absolutely nothing to do with the National Identification Authority as an institution. We made the request for payment through the GiftMIS platform on time, as we are required to do, in December, on time. But there are processes beyond the National Identification Authority, processes lying between the Controller and Accountant General's Department and the Bank of Ghana and the retail banks that, as it were, farm out the wages of the staff to them. As recently as just yesterday evening, I spoke with the Controller and Accountant General. The payment the releases had been made only yesterday. That is not a failure or a function of NIA.
Whose function is it?
Oh, it is a controller. It is the
Ministry of Finance.
The managers, yes, the managers of Ministry of Finance. And then, of course, it will go to the Bank of Ghana for the actual releases to be made to the individual banks. But it is not for want of diligence and effort on our part. Now, these are matters when on the 30th or 31st, I've forgotten exactly when. When I spoke with the controller, I shared that information with my head of finance, who also shared that information with the staff, with the expectation that around the 2nd or 3rd of January, that the releases would be made. Now that didn't happen. The releases, I'm told authoritatively by the controller yesterday, that the releases have been made as of yesterday. Now it will take that process. So I expect that it will be liquid in their accounts by Monday. I think that by tomorrow they should be able to get notifications that their salaries or wages have landed.
In other news, it appears the main opposition NDC and the governing MPP are both exploring the best alliances to back their entrenched position on the EC's decision to compile a new voters register. Since the EC first announced the decision, citing bloating of the current roll, the NDC and some parties have since strongly opposed that, saying the time is just too close to the main election for the exercise. But while that agenda may gather some momentum, the governing MPP has also joined forces with other smaller parties to back the EC's position. The party's General Secretary, John Buedu, says there is urgent need for the EC to compile a new voters register. Now, in a meeting with the parties, Mr. Buedu cited challenges including the absence of facial verification of voters and biometric verification machines.
What they are saying is supported by facts. They were in government in 2012. New register was done in April, May in 2012. Until they tell us the difficulties and challenges they had as a result of doing it in that year and at that time, we won't accept it until the vendors and the Electoral Commission also tell us that the time is short, particularly in an election year. But we've done it over and over again. In 2004, we did a new register in 2004, which is also an election year.
So with this particular one, that means, like what you said earlier, when we are done with this one, we are not going to have any...
I'm praying we will not, because now that we are going to have a fully automated ID card that covers all of us, I believe that there will be a need to integrate all our ID cards as one entity in order to ensure that we won't be thinking about DVLA cards, net pension card and all that. And I believe that with this one, an enhanced form where you have facial recognition, where you have quick access to the data, and also, more importantly, this time around, EC's own officers and technical people will be the managers of the system, and they will have full control of the database of this register. And I think it's important that we are concerned about that, because no country anywhere, considering what is happening across the world, where countries are able to influence the database of other countries, to the extent that in America and UK, we are told that Russia is capable of influencing the election through the IT system. It is important that we ourselves as a nation control our own system.
On the other hand, at a forum organized by the Coalition for Good Governance, the chairman of the PNC, Bernard Mona, cautioned the EC against plans to proceed with the compilation of the new register.
Obviously, the Electoral Commission is planning something sinister. The other thing that all of us must recognize is that if you take the issues one by one, why is it that the Electoral Commission, after all this, when we have flawed one argument upon the other, the Electoral Commission comes to tell us recently that the voters' register is bloated? When has the voters' register never been bloated before? Because one of the reasons for which a voters' register is bloated is that people die. And people who die, their names are still on the voters' register. I am not sure whether the name of J.H. Mensah has been removed from the voters' register. I am not sure whether Vice President Mr. Atter's name has been removed from the register. I am not even sure whether President Ivan Sata Mills, who died, his name has been removed from the register. Of course, my father, who died recently, his name is still on the voters' register. It's obvious that the voters' register will be bloated by the number of dead people whose names are still on the voters' register. Question is, do dead people vote? So if dead people don't vote, and their names are on the register, it amounts to nothing, because you must go there to ensure that you verify your identity. And so these people cannot resurrect or cannot come out from their graves to go and vote. So even if their names are still on the register, you can say the voters' register is bloated by the number of deaths that are still on the register. But it's obvious that dead people don't vote. So there's no need to go and start a whole new process. If you think that dead people can vote, on the day that you compile a new register, people will still die.
Veteran journalist Kwesi Pratt says the Electoral Commission will plunge the nation into chaos if they push through with the agenda.
You have less than 10 months to an election. A lot of people think that we are going to have the elections in December, and therefore they think we have 12 months. We don't. The elections will take place on the 7th of December, so you don't have the whole of December. January is virtually gone, and so on. So practically, you have 10 months to an election. There are so many things that happen before elections, and you know them, so I'm not going to repeat them. In this 10-month period, we have decided to compile a new voters register. Of course, if you know the people who are doing these things, sometimes no sense can sound like sense. So they are confused. They are totally confused. I want to submit here and now that 10 months is not a sufficient period for compiling a new voters register, and that if we attempt to do it, we will throw the next elections into total chaos. And that, from the point of view of common sense, we should shelve this useless adventure of compiling a new voters register.
Meanwhile, the coalition of political parties in support of a new electoral roll have issued a statement which reads in part that they wish at this juncture to respond to some of the claims that have so far been made by Kwesi Pratt and his group, and accordingly set the record straight. And in answering critical questions, so why should the Electoral Commission compile a new voters register in an election year? The response is Records have it that anytime the Electoral Commission of Ghana compiled the new voters register, it had almost always done that in an election year. Indeed, the current biometric voters register, which was compiled by the Electoral Commission according to the statement, was done in election year, which was in 2012. It continues that also in 2004, the Electoral Commission compiled new voters register prior to the general elections held that year. Hence, the Commission's capability to compile a new voters register in an election year could certainly not be doubted by any stretch of the imagination. It also continues also within the same year, that's 2004, the EC compiled new voters register, and in answering the question, it is too expensive to compile a new voters register. The response is, this is a blatant falsehood because, on the contrary, the report from the independent consultant as well as the EC's own IT team had established that it is rather more expensive refurbishing the current system, which had become obsolete and unfit for purpose, than to acquire an entirely new one. In other words, the amount of money spent on refurbishing parts and renewing warranties on the current system could be used to acquire a brand new system that is going to be robust, modern, and durable, as well as user-friendly, with full functionalities and certainly warranties. As key stakeholders, the group says they associate themselves wholly with any electoral reforms or processes that seek to enhance the nation's electoral system and engender the needed confidence and credibility in Ghana's elections. They, however, implore the Electoral Commission to continue to engage all stakeholders, including those opposed to this undertaking, in an atmosphere of openness and sincerity. The statement continues that the Commission must continue to demonstrate that it has the power, the wherewithal within the constraint of time to administer the new biometric voter management system, and also to compile a new voters register ahead of the 2020 general elections. And the statement is signed by the NDP, LPG, MPP, DPP, GLP, MVP, UPP, GCPP, PNC, and many others. In many related issues, security analyst is warning it would be difficult to stop the activities of vigilante groups in the 2020 elections as long as government fails to punish those recommended in the Ayawaso West Wogon by-election violence. 23 people suffered various degrees of injuries during the violence, which many described as a scar on the country's democracy. Well, as many of you will know, government in its white paper last year rejected at least half of the findings and recommendations of the Emil Short Commission, which investigated the election violence. I will bring you a number of the extracts of both reports.
In its findings, the Commission noted that while there was some semblance of security provided within the Ayawaso West Wogon constituency on the day of the elections, the otherwise reasonable arrangement was abruptly disrupted by the SWAT team, who, though were not part of the arrangement, arrived on the scene unannounced. The Commission was particularly worried about the lack of coordination in ensuring a proper mapping of the security needs of the elections and strategic hotspots in light of past experiences. In its recommendations, it called on the President to review and restructure the Ministry of National Security establishment with a view to ensuring clarity of responsibilities and roles as well as lines of reporting. It proposed the SWAT team of the National Security Council Secretariat should be disbanded and operatives be reassigned as appropriate. The Commission further recommended that support for special operations should be sought from the specialized units of the police directly as and when necessary. 50% of the recommendations provisions that make specific reference to individuals and their specific roles they played leading to the violence during the Ayawaso West Wogon by-election were rejected by government in the white paper. The Emil Short Commission recommended the criminal prosecution of Mr. Ernest Akumia alias Double, and government took note of it and referred the matter to the CID for investigation. In the case of DSP Samuel Kojo Azugu, the commission recommended his removal from command responsibility at the National Security and reassigned. Government once again took note of it and referred it to the IGP for consideration. The white paper, however, rejected recommendations for Colonel Michael Poku and Brian Echampong, Minister of State in charge of National Security, to be reprimanded. The prosecution of the man who slapped Ningo Prampram MP Sam George was also rejected.
Meanwhile, the Executive Secretary to the defunct Emil Short Commission, Ernest Kofi Abochi, is calling for a clean-up of the security sector ahead of this year's general elections to forestall the lapses witnessed during the Ayawaso West Wogon by-election.
We thought that given the importance of the security sector, particularly in an electoral season as we have in 2020, it is important that we streamline the security sector and that, I use the word advisedly, that we clean up the structure of our security system to ensure the avoidance of the kinds of contradictions and difficulties that we saw as far as the coordination of the security apparatus and the security dynamics of the country was concerned. So that's informed substantially the committee's finding as far as the structural realignment of the security sector was concerned. Again, as I indicated, government knows best. Government knows best what it requires as far as the security sector was concerned. But in light of our work, we thought that recommendation was a useful recommendation moving forward in guiding government, in guiding the state to better deliver on the security needs of Ghana as a vital public good.
In relation to that, Dr. Kingsley J. is a security analyst and lectures at the University of Cape Coast. He is warning it will be difficult to stop activities of vigilante groups in this year's elections as long as government fails to punish those recommended in the Ayawaso West Wogon by-election. He spoke to MFA Apple.
You need to punish people to serve as deterrent to those who want to commit same, nefarious activities. And once people commit such nefarious activities and they are not punished, it encourages others to do same. So I believe that in 2020 we'll continue to see the so-called vigilante groups, which I call local terrorists. The reasons, apart from what I've said, are many, but I'll just give you a few. The first one is that, vigilantism in our system is a demand and supply security situation. So as long as political parties demand their services, they will avail themselves. And this is reinforced by the winner-takes-all system, which makes our elections a do-or-die affair. And for that matter, even when there is a vigilante, so-called vigilante group that belongs to the ruling party, it is difficult for you to punish them because they are part of your people.
But at least a law has been passed, and we've witnessed a primaries at least conducted by the opposition NDC. We didn't see vigilante groups play out in that. Is that not commendable?
Yes, Zemifa, you will agree with me that Ghana is replete with laws. But look at our laws and how we behave. Do we really abide by the laws? Vehicles go through red lights, they are not punished. A lot of things happen that we just gloss over. People are to do the right things, they don't do them. How many people have been punished in those respects? So it's one of our laws. And, those who are concerned are the rulers. It is not you and I. It is those who are concerned, those who should really see to the execution of these laws who are affected. And they can refuse to, abide by them. There are many laws binding people in power that they don't even accede to. So it's one thing passing a law, another thing, making it work.
So, but look, that's a wrap for the things that we have to do. But please remember, we have the business side of PM Express right next. And of course, George Wafe is having some great conversations on many related subjects, as you already know. But that'll be it for tonight. Thank you for joining us.